Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is XCOM 2? Well, you may have seen my preview video, which consisted of the preview build. What you might be surprised by is that, well, I actually beat the game prior to it coming out. This is very rare for me. I've said for the last 6 years that I only do first impressions. Well, my first impression is 72 hours long. Oops. I suppose that's something of an endorsement, isn't it? If I decided to take that much time, willingly, to play the game. Well, it is. It absolutely is an endorsement, no doubt about it. I'm going to tell you why, and I'll try to expand upon what I said in my preview video and show you some later game content. First things first, the options menu. Let's talk a little bit about performance problems, because in my preview video I mentioned that the game had some issues with optimization. It still does, unfortunately. It is all over the place in terms of frame rate. It's not that important, because of course it is a turn-based game, so frame rate is not going to affect the gameplay anywhere near as much as it would in something that was real-time, but it's still very annoying, and I'm not really sure as to why it doesn't run all that well. It's confusing. I mean, the game does look a lot better, don't get me wrong. If you compare it to the original XCOM, at least the one that came out a couple of years ago, then you will note that yes, it does look a lot better, and it's had quite some improvements in terms of texture quality and the amount of effects that the game actually has available, as you can see right here. However, running with anti-aliasing on will slice your frame rate up real bad. I mean, I don't like FXAA because of the sort of Vaseline on the screen effect. MSAA, even two times, is going to hit your frame rate pretty hard, and ambient occlusion also caused the same problem, so I turned that down, although I did up my anisotropic filtering and got texture quality and everything to maximum and all that sort of thing. Draw distance on high. And then you've got some other options. This is a lot of new stuff compared to the original game, such as subsurface scattering and screen space reflections, all that sort of thing. Don't be afraid to knock these down, because this game definitely needs some optimization. I don't believe it has a game-ready driver yet. You wouldn't really expect a strategy game like this to be demanding in terms of the performance, and yet it is. And that, I imagine, is because they didn't prioritize optimizing it before they released it. This is obviously not a good thing, and I'm hardly going to say to them that that's okay. It's not, but it is a genre in which that matters less. Okay, so gameplay options here. You don't have a huge amount, but I've turned the action camera off here for my gameplay. I'm going to turn it on for the purpose of this demonstration. And the reason is that the action camera often bugs out and causes problems in terms of delaying the turns. Turning it off is a good way to avoid a lot of that, but since I'd like to demonstrate the potential problems with the gameplay flow, I mean, we may get some today, we may not, then I'm going to leave the action camera on here. Essentially, there are various camera problems with the game that I did demonstrate to some degree in my preview, and are arguably worse in the full edition of the game, considering the amount of stuff that's going on. The camera problems can cause a variety of weird animation decouplings, such as the gun simply not firing and yet something falling over and dying anyway. This can sometimes cause the screen to freeze for a good few seconds where the animation should be playing, except it's not. It can also cause turns just to hang for no apparent reason. There's a lot of issues with the animation in this game that really need to be fixed. They don't really affect the gameplay outside of slowing the turns down, and as I said, you can minimize it by turning this feature off. So just bear that in mind. Interface, pretty much seen this before. You've got some key binding, rebinding, and all that sort of thing available here. Nothing too complicated. Always nice to be able to rebind some of the stuff, though, no doubt about that. They do not give you the option to rebind absolutely everything, but pretty much, you know, pretty much. You can actually have, I believe, more than 10 abilities on your quick bar, which means that you can't bind a key to it, but that's a very, very minor issue. Outside of that, you got your audio sliders right here. Voice over IPS for the multiplayer. I did not get a chance to play the multiplayer simply because there's nobody playing it at the moment. The game isn't out yet, so that's to be expected. I will perhaps try and do a multiplayer video afterwards, but looking at the lobby and the setup, it looks very, very similar to the multiplayer in the original XCOM, which was something of a sideshow. They didn't invest a huge amount of time in it, and it doesn't look like they've done it here either, but I haven't had a chance to really test it outside of putting together a squad. Alright. That's about it in terms of the options menu. As I said, the performance concerns are very real with this game. Oop, don't want to do that. Let's leave that on. The performance concerns are very real, and I should point them out. Okay. So, we're going to jump into the game, and I'm going to set this to the equivalent of classic difficulty. If we go to new game here, you'll notice they changed the difficulty names around Rookie, Veteran, Commander, and Legend. I have beaten the game completely on Veteran. which claimed to be a challenge appropriate for players familiar with XCOM. I would say that this is too easy if you are familiar with the original XCOM and you've played Enemy Within. I found it too easy personally. I barely lost anybody outside of the final mission, which was a huge difficulty spike. I would strongly suggest that if you are looking for the so-called true XCOM experience, that Commander is where you want to go, and I'll demonstrate as to exactly why that is when we jump in. You can also, of course, turn on and off the tutorials. I would strongly recommend leaving them on initially because there are some quite different mechanics that I have demonstrated in my previous video, but I'll mention again when we go into this, that you'll really want to know. And, of course, leaving the beginner VO on is always a good idea for pointing out those little nuances. So, we have a metric ton of save files here, don't we? So, we're going to jump into this one, which is a save for WTF Is. And we're going to set this to the classic difficulty. This is quite far through the campaign. I'm going to try and avoid spoiling any major plot points here. Alright, so welcome to the Avenger. This is your new base in XCOM 2, as opposed to what you had in the previous games, which you may remember were, well, underground. This one isn't. This one's in the sky. It's landed at the moment, but you get the idea. You've taken over an old alien transport ship and used it as your resistance base. As you may or may not be aware, if you watched the previous video, you certainly do know, but I'll give you a quick primer nonetheless. The storyline of this game is really quite simple. You lost. The first time they invaded, you did not win. And canon says that you lost horribly, in fact. You got your asses handed to you. XCOM was completely overrun and the Earth taken over by the aliens, who then put into place something of a benevolent dictatorship in the form of Advent, which promised to cure the human condition. And most people complied. You didn't. And later on, about 20 years after the invasion, XCOM is revived with the Avenger as their core base and endeavors to spark a resistance movement across the world and defeat the aliens once and for all before the Avatar project is completed. I will not spoil exactly what that is, and I've also turned off ambient audio to make sure that it doesn't give you story spoilers during this section, which it has a tendency to do at this stage of the game. This save file is quite advanced. It's somewhat towards the end. It's not quite there yet, but it's in a good position where I shouldn't spoil too much or indeed any of the story, but still be able to show you some of the high-tech and high-tier stuff. So, let's talk about base building first. So, I gave you a brief overview in my preview video, but there's a couple of additional things I'd like to add now that I've played the whole game through and actually beaten it. So, the base building is actually quite basic in comparison to the previous title. You may remember that XCOM Enemy Unknown had a so-called adjacency system in which you would construct buildings and depending on what they were next to, they would gain a bonus. Well, that doesn't really exist this time around. There is a building that does do that, and it's called the Workshop right here. You build this, and it creates what are called gremlin drones, which can be used to staff various things that are adjacent to it. So this is a terrible position for it. Ideally, you'd probably want it here or here. And these drones, as you can see, are now staffing these areas, and each of these buildings can be staffed by multiple engineers or drones, and that will increase the effectiveness of those buildings. So this eliminates the need to build multiple buildings of the same type. Outside of that, you're clearing out alien machinery, which will reward you with supplies and materials in order to make space, but as you can see, there are actually only 12 spaces available total in terms of construction. So you're really only going to be building one of each thing. And that's definitely streamlined versus the previous game. There's no doubt about that. And some people might be upset about that because they might be seeing the game going even further in the wrong direction. I didn't really like the base building of XCOM Enemy Unknown in comparison to the previous games. I didn't think it was very well fleshed out. And this game has kind of taken even more of that away. However, I will say that it does have a bit of an advantage. While it does have a lot of downsides, it does, from what I can tell, mean that there isn't such a strict build order this time around in order to truly succeed. For instance, I haven't even built the Scilab yet, which unlocks the 5th class, and I've almost beaten the game on this save. You can beat the entire game without side troopers at all, if you so desire. Alternatively, you can rush them very early on. You can get that tech really quick, and you can exploit that fact as a result of getting it really early on, but you'll sacrifice something else in the process. So, I think versus the previous game where you had to build a satellite as your first item, and then you had to build a satellite network, and you had to build them adjacent to each other, you've got a lot more flexibility as to which of these buildings you construct first. You can choose, if you wish, to forego some of these buildings in favor of others, and focus specifically on particular strategies, which I do like. So while the building system is definitely bare bones, I will say, it does give a bit of flexibility, strategic flexibility in the overall game. Okay, so let's show you a few things that I didn't really mention in the preview video, and also highlight a few things that are new this time around. So if we head on over to the Proving Ground here, what you're going to see is the ability to create projects. Now, I have a number of different unlocks on the world map which allow me to build these instantly, which is quite nice. So you can build items which are kind of unique, I suppose is probably the best way to describe them. Anything you research through the research system will be given to everybody. So let's say plasma rifles, for instance. Everybody has access to plasma rifles, and I've got enough plasma rifles to kit out a team. No problem at all. And that happens when you research things. However, things that are built in the Proving Grounds, they only build one copy of them. So the exosuit, if I build an exosuit here, I'll only gain one of them. If I build a warsuit, I'll only gain one of them, etc., etc. So these items can be lost. I mean, all items can be lost, especially customized guns. If you die on the field and you don't pick up the body, you will lose that item at the end of the match, which is not all that great. But in this case, these are unique. So if I build one warsuit, then I have only one warsuit, and only one person can wear it at any given time. What you can also do is build experimental items. Now these, as you can see right here, consist of ammo, grenades, armor, heavy weapons, and powered weapons. Powered weapons being the most powerful guns in the game. These are one-shot heavy weapons that can be equipped on warsuits, and I believe exosuits as well, I think. I haven't actually tried to do that because almost all of my squad is now wearing warsuits, so they're objectively better than exosuits, so I never wear them again, but every time you build one of these, it's going to give you a random drop out of the loot table for these items. So let's go with a powered weapon. Why not? We got a blaster launcher, which is actually a very powerful weapon that will home in on targets and has a massive blast radius. So that's how you build it. And I now have one blaster launcher, which I can now equip, and so on and so forth. That's how the Proving Ground works. It's kind of neat. It does encourage different playstyles every time based on the different weapons and ammo types that you get. I mean, I haven't seen all the ammo types in the game yet. I've seen blue screen rounds, which are anti-mech, which are really potent, and I've also seen Viper rounds, but there are Hellfire rounds and a couple of other different types of round available as well. So that's pretty cool, and you've also got different kinds of grenade that you can build. Now, I was a bit disappointed by the fact that the game only has the same 3 tiers of technology that the previous games had. So you've got your tier 1 weapons, which are your standard guns, like solid slug ammunition and that kind of thing. You then have magnetic weapons, and then you have plasma weapons. That's it. I was hoping for a bit more, especially considering what the Long War did with adding multiple tiers of weaponry. I was hoping they'd maybe add another tier, maybe a tier 4, but they didn't. They chose to stick to those 3 tiers. And they're also objectively better than each other. So it's a very linear progression from solid bullet weapons to magnetic weapons to plasma weapons. And there's no real reason to stay on the previous tier unless you just can't afford to build the next tier. Simple as that. That was a bit disappointing to me. I was hoping that you would be able to see a little bit more variety and a little bit more choice there. However, I think that the addition of a huge number of secondary items when it comes to your loadout does somewhat make up for that. There's a lot of choice here. You'll see here that I haven't built the beam cannon yet. If I do build this, then all of my heavy troopers will gain access to this, by the way. You do have to build it, but you don't have to build one for each trooper, which is nice. All sorts of armor types are available as well. I have most of them researched with the exception of Warden armor, which is the standard tier 3 armor. All of my guys are either in Wraith armor or in war suits, so I don't bother with Warden armor, but there is a reason to use Warden armor over other types. The standard armor types have more than one secondary slot available for items, whereas the other types don't. So if you want to specialize with war suits and wraith suits, you can, but if you want to be a little bit more general and carry a lot more items, then you'll want to use the regular armor suits. So they're all pretty much competitive with each other. It really depends on what kind of thing you want to do with your squad. There's a lot of choice here, especially with the addition of all of those unique items that I was talking about in the Proving Ground. So combine those two together, and you have a lot of loadout choice. Let's have a look at that, actually. So dive into my soldiers here, and we can have a look at me. There we go. Here I am. This is my warsuit, my red, white, and blue warsuit, and he's carrying, I think, a magnetic cannon of some description. If I go to my loadout right here, you can see the limitations that I have as a result of my warsuit. Now, the warsuit is a tier 3 exosuit. It has a shield wall ability, which means I can create high cover out of a soldier, which is quite similar to the way that mechs used to work. However, what it can also do is give you armor. And armor is really powerful because it's a flat damage reduction. Unless the armor gets shredded by an explosive or armor-piercing attack, this will continue to resist damage, and that makes these soldiers very durable. So I built a lot of warsuits because armor's really, really good, especially when combined with grenadiers who can get what's called blast padding, which gives them an additional slot of armor. However, if you pick a warsuit, you've only got one utility item slot, whereas you pick, say, Predator armor, which is the tier 2 regular medium armor, there's an additional utility item slot here. I can equip all sorts of things. Right now, I've got a couple of different grenades and a hazmat vest, which is going to add extra armor and resistance. And actually, surprisingly enough, they, especially with the Warden suit, they become quite competitive with the war suits in terms of durability. Not quite as durable, but a bit more flexible. So you've got a couple of different options there. The Spider suit is the... Well, I mean, you've seen that before in the previous game, but it's the tier 2 equivalent of the Wraith suit. I'll show you the Wraith suit, actually, while I'm here. That's a nice little bit of tech. There's Dodger. Dodger is wearing a Wraith suit. The Wraith suit allows Dodger to walk through walls, and also has a grapple on it as well, which, again, is extremely powerful, as you might imagine, and also gives them a lot of dodge. So dodge has been added into the game, and if you dodge an attack, you will only be grazed by it. You will take a lot less damage, so dodge is very powerful. This does not give you extra armor, and it doesn't give you as much HP, but it gives you a lot of mobility. And you can run through walls and obstacles, and it's ideal for ranger or stealth classes or snipers that need to get high up on the terrain. She is petting Strippin right now, which is her weapon, because, of course, you can name your weapons. Why wouldn't you? Now, I was talking a little bit about weapon upgrading in my previous video. Now, I will say now, having beaten the game completely, I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get some really cool fancy loot. As it stands, it seems that most of the loot is tiered in a very similar way to the guns. So there's tier 1, 2, and 3. There's regular versions, advanced versions, and superior versions. And they're all better than each other. And you get these as random drops in the game, which is in itself pretty cool. I mean, I like the weapon upgrade system a lot. I mean, it's very powerful in many ways. You see the increased hit chance here, and this advanced stock means that even if I miss, I'm going to do 2 damage anyway. It's a really potent set of abilities, and there are some even more powerful combinations, such as giving a sniper a superior magazine. That's bonkers. I mean, the sniper rifle now has 6 rounds, and if you combine that with some of the crazy new abilities like Kill Zone, this sniper can fire 6 rounds in 1 turn. That's insane. It's really crazy. The power creep is truly real, but admittedly, the enemies have creeped up in power as well. I mean, they really have become much more powerful, much more flexible, so it is to be expected. There are some crazy abilities available, especially once you hit the Colonel rank. I mean, there's a mass heal that heals the entire map and cures all status effects. There's Serial for sharpshooters, which enables you to refund your shoot action every time you kill something, so you can just keep shooting if you keep killing things, which is crazy. And there's also something called Reaper, which is a chain melee attack, which keeps running from person to person to person. There's some very, very powerful abilities in this game. Now, on normal difficulty mode, I will say that those abilities feel overpowered. I found normal to be a bit easy, but I do have a lot of experience with XCOM, so I should have really played the game through on the commander mode. It's a random floating head in the back right there. On the commander mode first. That should have been the way to go. Commander Iron Man seems like the best way to go if you're experienced with XCOM. If you're not, play normal, sure. But I definitely felt like my soldiers got increasingly overpowered as the game went on. As a result of only playing on normal, I barely lost anybody. I mean, I literally only lost 3 soldiers total in my entire 60-hour campaign. And then on the final mission, I lost 5 troops, because that mission is a massive jack-up in difficulty and is actually kind of unfair in many ways. But I suppose that's to be expected. So yeah, play it on the higher difficulty, and do watch out for the power creep if you don't. It's a little unfortunate that it fell into that, but I imagine that's the sort of thing that's going to get tweaked by modding. That's very much worth mentioning, by the way. The modding support for this game, even on day 1, is going to be quite hefty. And according to some of the mod developers, they're giving them access to all the tools that these guys had in developing the game in the first place. So they can do almost anything. The modding scene for this game, especially with built-in Steam Workshop support, could be an absolute lifesaver in terms of longevity. It's not that the game doesn't have longevity in and of itself. It does. It's an incredibly long game. It's got a lot of replayability, and the flexibility of the tech and the buildings and the loot drops and the way that the different classes can play out, I think is going to give people reasons to play it multiple times, especially since you'll probably fail on the higher difficulty levels. But the addition of modding should make this an absolute must-buy in terms of value proposition. I mean, that's incredible that they supported it that much. And it's smart. It's savvy development practice. Firaxis realized after the success of Long War and the modding for the original game that this was a way to keep selling copies. Modding is not the enemy. It isn't. It's your friend. It can result in long tails, years and years and years of sales for a game that otherwise would be off the shelf if it were on a console. So this is an ideal choice, and I applaud Firaxis for fully embracing modding. That is the exact right thing to do, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what these developers can come up with. Okay, that about covers everything, I would say, in the base building component of the game and anything outside of the combat. Like I said, I did have a few disappointments. I really hoped that there would be more tiers of tech beyond what I thought that there would be, but they've stuck to the same 3 tiers. So that's a bit unfortunate, and I was hoping for some really interesting, unique loot drops. It may just be that I never saw them, yeah? In 60 hours of play, but maybe I just never saw them. Maybe on higher difficulty levels they drop. Maybe there's some unique drops that you can get. I just don't know. No, it's impossible to know that, but I think that would be a great modding idea. That would be really cool. I'd love to see that. So, if you want to know more about these other systems that I've kind of glossed over here, do watch my previous video, because I really don't want to retread the same ground. But let's dive into the bridge, and let's go and look and see what's going on the world map and show you some combat right here. We actually have a mission to invade a UFO, which sounds perfect for this video. Outside of that, though, you'll see that I've taken over quite a lot of the planet. Not all of it. I've made contacts with the Resistance here, and as I do that, I unlock territory, and things can happen within that territory. So, if I make contact in this area, I might be able to gain access to a facility, for instance. Shutting down these facilities is key to stopping the Avatar Project. The Avatar Project is basically your doom clock. Once this hits maximum, you will have about 20 days to force the Avatar Project back in progress, or you will lose. Simple as that. I actually like this a little bit better than the previous system in which countries left the XCOM project. It made no sense for countries to leave the XCOM project in terms of the plot of the game. Why would you do that? XCOM is literally your only hope. Why would you abandon them? That's dumb. It's like the guys that said, hey, stop building Jaegers when the kaiju came through. Quit it, idiots! It's the only thing you've got. We'll build a wall. That won't work. It's a dinosaur. Quit it. Anyway, point aside, the Avatar project is mysterious, and I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but I do like the way that it's implemented. You can set it back in real, tangible ways by finding facilities, by engaging in hidden guerrilla events, which will set it back, and by destroying these facilities. So you have a very clear goal. As opposed to trying to juggle all of these different countries and trying to make them happy, this time around you have one clear, directed, focused goal that you can choose to do at a particular time, or you can choose to maybe let it tick on a little bit more in favor of doing something else to gain momentum and gain resources and research. And that's a choice. Those are meaningful, strategic choices that you have to make. You're not actually forced into making that many choices this time around, which I do like. The artificial mechanic in the previous game in which you had cities that were invaded and you could only choose one to defend, that's gone. You can defend cities, absolutely, but you only get one at a time. So you can successfully defend a resistance base. Now, they do force you to pick between guerrilla operations, but it's a little bit different to the way that the cities used to work. There's no panic meter anymore. So previously you could only save one of 3 cities and then the panic would go up in the other 2 places. This time around, when you do a guerrilla op, you can cancel 1 incoming dark event. You can see right now we have active dark events in play. That means the aliens are doing something bad. There are going to be additional alien infiltrators on every mission. Now I can choose really which debuff that I want. I can cancel one of them and then I have to stick with the others. I like that system. I like it a lot. It's almost like customizable difficulty. You can make strategic decisions based on your current situation as to which of those events is going to be the most detrimental to you. If you're a very stealthy squad and you're reliant on stealth play, then you probably want to cancel the event that gives increased alertness. If you have a lot of low HP troops, you might want to get rid of the event that stops the aliens from loading their advent troops with Viper poison rounds. If you don't want a lot of injuries, you might want to get rid of those. Or, of course, if the Avatar project is almost complete, you might want to focus on setting back the Avatar project and the construction of their Avatar facilities. So I love that system. I think it's much, much clearer than the previous system. I think it works a lot better. It has less artificial choice, although it does still have some, and the way that they've implemented the artificial choice is better. Here's the theme with XCOM 2. This is why I think that XCOM 2 is actually a statement of bold and brave design. XCOM 2 doesn't change the core principles on which XCOM Enemy Within and Enemy Unknown were built. It sticks to them and says, you know what, we thought we did it right, but we can do it better. We can refine it. We stick to these principles, but we can do it a little bit better this time around. And I think that on almost all fronts, they managed that. And I think that's awesome. So this, to me, is a statement from Firaxis saying, we nailed it first time, but we can do it better this time because we have more experience and we've got some cool ideas. And they implemented those across the board. Now, what that does mean is if you didn't like the original XCOM remake, you will not like this, I don't think. Unless there were some very minor gripes that put you off. I do think that a lot of the systems have been improved, but simultaneously, they haven't changed them drastically. Absolutely not. They have not changed them drastically at all. But they think it's the right call. And you know what? That confidence is conveyed to me as the player. And I agree with them. I think that it probably was the right call, and I dig it. Alright, let's get into some fighting, shall we? We've had quite enough talking. So I'm going to bring along myself. Dodger can come along as well. Strippin's going to come along. And we also have Gerard, the completionist. He's a badass. I don't know who this guy is. Random dude. And Jenna's going to come along as well to make sure that everything doesn't go horribly wrong. I think we might want to give her a med kit. There we go. She's wearing regular armor, so she can carry that. In fact, might want to change out a few of these weapons here. Maybe put a flashbang grenade in there. That's always nice. I believe we produced a new power weapon. Let's equip it. So if we head over to... I'm going to unequip my rocket launcher. I'm going to equip the blaster launcher, which is just more powerful. And I'll unequip the shredder gun as well. So let's take a second blaster launcher. These are really, really potent. I don't believe I have another war suit. I think I've only got 3 war suits at this stage. Oh, I do. There we go. So Jenna could be in a war suit as well. And I'm going to actually throw away the skulljack and get a nano med kit instead. So she's a lot tougher this time around. And look at that. Looks like a bit of a badass, I gotta say. She has a customized plasma rifle. She's ready to rock and roll. All right, let's get into some combat. Let's show you some higher level enemies here. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm going to go and try and salvage this UFO. I think we have everything optimally set up. Let's just double check that you know what? I like the shredder gun better than the rocket launcher, so we'll take that. And yeah, you can stick with what you got. Sure. Let's rock and roll. Here we go. Now, I've gone over the changes to combat for the most part, but I would like to talk a little bit more about it, and I'd also like to talk about the way that the combat works at later times in the game. And how well I feel that it's balanced and all that kind of thing. And I also need to talk about some of the technical issues that the game does have, because you're going to be noticing frame rate drops most likely during the level, which is very unfortunate. I don't know what it is about the XCOM games and the lack of optimization, as well as the various camera bugs and problems that these games have. But XCOM 2 is not immune to them, and it's very disappointing, actually, to see that lack of polish on launch. I will admit that the vast majority of problems do not affect gameplay, except when it hangs up the turns, but for the, you know, these are the kind of things that really should have been ironed out before release. Alright. Not your granddaddy's UFO, as you can tell over here. I start in concealment, and those who have not watched the previous video might wonder what concealment is. Well, your squad in most missions starts concealed, which means that they are invisible until they run into an alien field of view. This means that you are not risking running into what's called an alien pod, as you were in the previous games. What you used to do is slowly creep forward, you'd trigger a pod, the pod would then detect you, run into cover, and then you'd fire at it. And it meant slow progress through the mission. The squad concealment option allows you to set up an ambush. You are the hunters as opposed to the enemy this time around. So as a result, you are able to get the drop on them. As long as I don't move into any of these areas, the aliens are not going to see me. So I can get the drop on the aliens, and this means that the start of the level is accelerated. I can move much faster without a lot of risk. It's still possible to run into a building and get detected if you're not smart, but I can safely run forward great distances without worrying about triggering enemy pods initially. I think that's a great change. And this is an example of the boldness and the refinement and the iteration of design in this game. As I said, they did not change the way that the pods worked, but they did alter the way that the pods triggered at the start of the game, which improved the pacing of the game. And I approve of that. That's great. I think that's really awesome. They did a great job of that. I love the concealment system, and it's also possible to make a stealthy trooper, which is a variant of the ranger, who can actually go invisible again. So you can use her to sneak around and assassinate key targets and do all sorts of cool stuff like that. Alright, we just need to avoid this turret. Thankfully, turrets don't move, so we shouldn't have too much of a problem getting in nice and close. We can set up a big ambush. Oh, we're going to see another pod. Okay, there's another alien pod over here. These are some super heavy turrets with a lot of armor, by the way, and this is on classic difficulty, so these guys are going to take a lot of punishment. But, I mean, those enemies, I could probably do a lot of damage with a heavy weapon. If I were to launch a blaster ball launcher right towards them, I could do huge damage here. So, I might want to try that. That's probably the best way to do it, but I want to try and set up an ambush first so that I have the ability to overwatch as I trigger them. Alright. Bullseye, or whatever your name is, you can move over here. Where's Strippin? Strippin's over there. He needs to get up high if possible, but I don't think I actually have the height necessary here to make this work, which is a bit unfortunate. I could also set up a kill zone, of course. That would be pretty cool, but I'm not going to do that just yet. Let's just put him on long watch here. And he has a blaster bomb, so we're going to put him on overwatch. Wait for these guys to trigger, and then we're going to try and blaster bomb them. Do a lot of damage, and they're going to patrol around the place. This is much more logical. They're not lying in wait for you, they're patrolling, and you get the drop on them. Thematically, it makes sense, and mechanically, it makes sense. It's a wonderful bonding of the two. Okay, now we're gonna do some bloody damage. Alright, let's set up a bunch of Overwatch over here. I'm not gonna have Dodger Overwatch, because she's probably gonna run in and be a crazy person. There we go, you could set up here. Let's have, I'm gonna move him forward, and then put him in Overwatch, and then we are gonna fire... In fact, you know what? We're going to fire the blaster bomb from there. There we go. This actually tanks the frame rate, by the way. And anything involving these overlays will cause frame rate problems for some reason. If I can hit the turret as well, I'd be really appreciative of that. Can I hit all of them at once? I don't believe so, but I can definitely hit those. All right, launch the blaster bomb. Here we go. This is a very powerful weapon. And this is what happens with it. Kaboom! Huge damage. I think we actually shredded the turret as well. That's great. And that's going to trigger the pod. And now, of course, my squad has been revealed. And everything hits the fan. But I have Overwatch set up, so we're going to start gunning people down as they try to move to cover. At least that's the plan anyway. There we go. Overwatch triggers and boom, boom, boom. Hopefully a lot of dead dudes. You'll notice the Overwatch is much better set up this time around compared to the previous game. You will not have multiple enemies, multiple friendly troops firing at the same target that's already dead. And it's a little bit more smooth in the way that they deliver it in terms of the camera angles. It does break, however, sometimes, so that's a little bit unfortunate. All right, everything's been activated here. We're going to set up kill zone with my sniper right here, which is an incredibly powerful ability. And let's see what kind of damage we can do. Well, that elite lancer is probably going down here. I could move in on this turret, but it's a little bit of a risk. I think I might want to actually move into cover first. There we go. And then we can try and hit the Lancer from there. We do actually have a flank on... We could kill our turret from here. We have a flank on that Codex, you know. Actually, let's take it out. Let's get the Codex out of the way. That's a very dangerous creature. We don't want that to stick around. And if the Lancer comes in, she'll probably be able to take it out with her sword before anything happens anyway, so that's all good. Let's talk a little bit about enemy variety, because what you're seeing here is stuff you've probably already seen before. There are some really crazy enemies towards the end of the game. The Andromedan, in particular, is one of the most insane enemies I've ever seen. And what they've done with the Sectopod is amazing. The Sectopod can actually walk through buildings because it can extend its legs out to ridiculous height. It's a very dangerous creature. They've also added the Gatekeepers, which are kind of a form of a cyber disc, but they're kind of psychic cyber discs. And that's Strip and just go to town with Killzone, by the way. Very powerful ability. And those enemies are dangerous, very dangerous. I will say this, maybe it was just my experience on normal mode, but the enemy distribution amongst the levels seemed a little bit off whack. Now, they love to throw Advent troops at you almost all the time. And Advent troops do scale quite well throughout the game. They're still reasonably powerful cannon fodder. Elite Lancers in particular are very dangerous. The Shield Bearers will be extremely potent, and you've got to watch out for those. But things like the Vipers in particular, and the Mutons and the Muton Berserkers, I almost never saw them. I ran into them on like one mission and they introduced them and then they almost never appeared again, which is crazy because I think the Viper is a really interesting enemy, as is the Muton Berserker. It was a bit weird to see so much Advent and yet so few of these other creatures. It may be just because I didn't do enough facility missions, and you don't have to do all of the facilities in order to win the game. I'm going to use my Shredder Gun here to try and blast away this turret, since it's got a lot of armor. The Shredder Gun should be able to, thankfully, shred through that. There we go, nice and easy. That also takes away the Overwatch, which is good. And is that turret down? It's not down. Okay, we'll just shoot from here. It seems like the safest bet. That was a terrible shot. You are awful. I should have gone for rapid fire or whatever, but hey, never mind. it was just really weird to see an abundance of Advent, who are, let's be honest, not the interesting enemy types in this game. They're not. They're cannon fodder, they're fine, they do their job, they're dangerous, but they're not the interesting enemies. And then see just a lack of other types. There are plenty of enemy types in the game, it's just the rate at which they spawn seemed to be a bit off. It might be because I played it through on normal difficulty. That may be why. That seems like a logical reason, I would imagine, for having that be the case. I imagine that if I play it on Classic, I'm going to get a lot more of the alien types and then less of the weaker Advent. And that's good, because the game's more interesting when you have those aliens and less interesting when you have too much Advent, as far as I'm concerned. Alright, who do we want to try and gun down here? We've got a 82% on that sectoid. That's a probable kill. Look at that. You are terrible. Never mind. Well, that could suck. But we'll deal with him, I'm sure. We've got a decent enough shot on that codex. Not a perfect one, though. We'll take it. 48%, why not? Outside of that, though, outside of those sort of spawning issues and the overall pacing, I do think the game does have a good enough enemy variety. And it's definitely varied things up. It's given the old enemies new abilities so that they're a lot more difficult to deal with. And, of course, it has done a good job of powering up all of these new enemies with a bunch of different abilities. They always feel threatening. I don't think there's a single enemy in the game that hasn't felt threatening to some degree to me. Even the basic Advent, as long as they flank you, can do pretty significant damage with their magnetic guns, so you always want to watch out for them, and things like the Elite Lancers are potentially deadly. So it did keep up that feeling of tension as a result. So I do love the bestiary, I suppose you can say, of this game. I love the fact that there's, like, really powerful enemies that have the ability to mind control people so early on. That really adds high stakes to the game. Now, of course, for some new players, that might be a little bit off-putting, because I hear a lot of people say, well, XCOM's a lot about RNG, and then people who want to defend XCOM will say, yep, that's XCOM, you know, that's how it works. And you're right, it is, but not everybody likes games that are reliant on RNG to some degree. Thing is, this is a game about controlling your RNG, you know? When somebody calls bullshit when they miss a 95% shot and then they lose the level as a result, I have to ask them, well, what decisions did you make up to this point that meant that you lost as the result of this one dice roll? Like, you should never be in a position where everything hinges on one dice roll. Ever. You know, you have so many different ways to mitigate that random aspect of the game. And if you're playing the game right, then that is what will happen. If you're not playing the game right and you're inexperienced, then okay, I can understand why you might believe that the game has a bunch of RNG BS. I've experienced the cruel RNG of XCOM, absolutely. And yeah, you always remember those misses as opposed to all of those hits. But it's just part of the game, it's never going away, and it's up to you to mitigate it as much as possible. And I think that, honestly, the game gives you the tools to do that for the most part, by giving you a bunch of different skills and all sorts of different items that will enable you to stack the odds in your favor. There are still going to be times where you're unlucky, but if you are strategic enough, those times should not kill you. That's the main point. Outside of that, I find the combat to be sublime this time around. There are definitely problems with the animations, which have certainly caused me issues, but they have made numerous little refinements, such as the little addition that the game has in terms of line of sight. You are still going to be shooting through walls, and there are going to be shots that you think could not possibly hit, and yet hit anyway. There are going to be weapons clipping through walls, there are going to be weird animation bugs where a soldier randomly elbows a window for some reason and then decides to shoot in the opposite direction. That happens. And it's buggy and it needs to be fixed, and I'm not going to excuse them. However, they have added little things like the addition of the line of sight indicator, which is a huge deal, and it will tell you, look, if you move to this square, you're going to have line of sight on this particular person. There's no longer any doubt of that, and that's great. That's a great addition. That should have been in there from the very start, and I'm glad that it's in XCOM 2. And it does make the combat a lot more enjoyable because you don't have those doubts. You still have to think about flanking an enemy, certainly, but you are told whether or not you have line of sight on them, which means that there are no longer any doubts as to whether or not this tiny piece of terrain is going to get in your way. Great. Feeling good about that. Lets me make some solid choices. I hear some really awful clanking over there. I have a feeling we might be about to run into a sector pod. That would be nice to show off, because those are dangerous. All right. Do I want to trigger another pod right here? Probably not. I think I want to set up a good sniping position before that happens. Is there any... There's no elevated position that I can really use here, though. As you see, my grapple doesn't attach to anything in this area, so... This could be dangerous. I'm gonna... I mean, I can get on top of those boxes. That would give me another elevated position, I suppose. Yeah, that might be an idea. That's actually not... actually, I can't get on top of them. That's cover, but... Okay, this will do. I'm gonna slowly set everybody up because I have a feeling something horrible is about to happen here. We'll move slightly forward, only slightly. Hopefully this was not the wrong call. No, we're good. We're good. Let's reload this plasma lance right here. And get ready to rock and roll. Reload the shotgun. And pop in. Oh, that triggered them. Well, it's a bunch of advent. That's not too bad. We'll get a shot off. Can she hit him from here? Nope. But the stock triggers. Oh, nice shot with the plasma rifle there. Very good. You'll notice just a significant improvement in terms of the overall aesthetic of this game. It's just got much more detail, better effects, better camera angles when they work, and of course the procedurally generated levels do add a hell of a lot of variety that was missing from the previous games. So I do enjoy that a great deal. I mean, in almost every aspect, it does seem like XCOM 2 is a marked improvement over the original and even the expansion. Yeah, it's lacking some of the customization that the gene modifications gave in the expansion, and I'm hoping that we'll add some of that back in with the DLC or an expansion of our own, but as it stands, the overall package that XCOM 2 is offering you right out of the gate feels pretty much content complete. Like, it is a meaningful, lengthy campaign with real improvements and real mechanical confidence. Ow, ow, ow. Thankfully, I'm wearing some armor. He's gonna get wrecked for that, but hey. Well, we haven't triggered the sector pod, so that's a plus. Oh, that's a shield bearer. We don't like those. Not one little bit. They make things much, much more difficult to handle. And the aliens are going to respond in 3 turns. We actually have to rush in here. We're going to have to go for it. All right. If we trigger the sector pod here, things are going to get really bad really fast. I think there was a sector pod. At least I heard one. I've got to rush my troopers in here because the distress beacon's about to go off and bring in reinforcements. Plus, it will let me show you the sector pod. I may be doing something very stupid here just for entertainment purposes. What can we hit? We can hit the shield bearer with an 83% crit. There's the camera angle going to hell. Nice big hit. Very good. A lot of damage. I don't have that many complaints about XCOM 2. I don't. You know, I expressed most of my concerns, I think, in the preview video, absolutely. It's mostly pacing. It's mostly difficulty level stuff. That's a sector pod. Oh, God. Which can be solved, of course, by playing it on Commander/Classic anyway. And it's mostly just about the way that they didn't really make too many crazy changes to the way that tech works in this game. It would have been, I think, nice to see a couple of really cool changes to that and a lot of diversification in terms of primary weapons. And they didn't do that. You know, they stuck to what was safe, they stuck to what worked, they stuck to a very linear tier progression, which is a little disappointing. But honestly, a lot of these are minor gripes. I have been enthralled by XCOM 2. I mean, I finished it before release, for God's sake. You know, I played a 60-hour campaign just because I wanted to. If that isn't an endorsement, then I don't know what the hell is, because you know how infrequently I finish video games. Like, it's just not a thing that I often do. Alright, I'm gonna have to throw the blaster bomb in here. I'm blowing up parts of the ship to do it, but this sector pod needs to go down. Here we... no, let's let it get out. Let's let it get out. That's so tough. Oh my god. I've never fought a sector pod on Classic. This is gonna be pretty brutal. Alright, let's go for the shot here. 52% chance. Let's try and take him out. And he misses. Not ideal. We can fire once he gets out of the ship, hopefully. Assuming the dodger doesn't get ripped apart before that, which is entirely possible. Let's set up a kill zone with our sniper here. Alright, you're dead. Absolutely. We're gonna go slash you up. Just the improvements are marked across the board. Like, it's an iterative game, but it's iterative in a very creative way. Which is surprising, because you'd think that those two things would be contradictory. And more often than not, they are. But in this case, it's just such an expression of confidence in their original mechanics, but thinking, well, how can we just put a better spin on that? Now, is that possible? Can we just put a bit of a better spin on what we did previously? And the answer is yes. They can get a little bit creative with mechanics that are already set in stone. And they can fit it thematically to this idea of being a resistance movement. And everything ties really well into that. So it's got a strong story. It's got strong mechanics. It's got excellent improvements on the original. And it's got a ton of depth. Great deal of customization. A sector pod that clips through walls. But hey. Oh my god. Dodger manages to dodge that. There we go. Living up to her name right there. She's gonna go in and attack it with a sword, I think. Drive me closer! I should hit it with my sword. Look at the size of this thing. It's smashing through the terrain as a result of that. XCOM 2 is XCOM dialed up to, not 11, it's dialed up to 12. And as a platform for future modding, as a platform for future ideas and DLC, I think this game is going to have a massive shelf life, and I hope it's a huge success as a result. It needs fine-tuning, it needs optimization, it certainly needs work, as you can clearly see the bugs happening right now. But a lot of this is aesthetic. A lot of these bugs are not really going to affect your gameplay all that much. XCOM 2 is a triumph of turn-based strategy. It's excellent in terms of its tactics, it's excellent in terms of its overall strategy layer and the decisions that you're making, in terms of resource management, and of course it has that classic XCOM feel of getting truly attached to your soldiers before they get eaten by chrysalids. And there's really no other game that gives you that. It's excellent. Astonishingly excellent, frankly. A brilliant improvement on the original. I would wholeheartedly recommend it. If you liked the original, just get this immediately. There's not even a question. If you didn't, well, maybe look at some of those changes. Maybe some of the things that I mentioned do go some way to alleviate some of your issues. It's possible. Facing it down. We can attack it with our sword. Let's go all out. Here we go. 100% chance to hit. I wish I had a rapid fire, but I don't. Here we go. Kaboom. What? Don't tell me that missed. That had a 100% chance to hit. I think we managed to miss a 100% hit chance, ladies and gentlemen. That must be a first in XCOM history. That's a bug. That sucks. Not happy with that. Oh god. Take a dead eye shot. The sector pod needs to die. Oh no. It's all going horribly wrong. I love XCOM 2 to death. It's my favorite game of the year so far. Obviously, it's still January. Actually, it's February now, but you get the idea. This game is excellent. Outstanding. Fantastic. Needs to be patched. But I had a load of fun with it, and I imagine that you will as well. XCOM 2, ladies and gentlemen. If you want any more information on it, then do watch my preview video where I go in detail through the mechanics and various tiers of enemies that you're going to be facing up against in this game. This sector pod is gonna have to die. We're going for the run and gun. Here we go. Come on. 100% hit chance. You better work this time. I think it's bugged. This sector pod is bugged. Oh, no, it's damaged. It's damaged. We can get it. We can kill it. Can we hit it from here? Do I have a 90% hit chance. All right, chain shot. This sector pod is going to explode. You're gonna have to see it happen. Here we go. Chain shot. Missed. Come on, one more, one more. Oh, we don't get a second one because we missed. Oh, no. It's gotta die. No! It lived! Ah! That was so painful! That's XCOM. Shouldn't have taken the risk. I'm an idiot. Ladies and gentlemen, XCOM 2. Buy it. You silly, silly people. Why wouldn't you? If you enjoyed this video, then by all means do feel free to click the like button, but if you are an evil Advent sympathizer, Bladestorm takes him out! Oh no, it's gonna explode. Oh no! Is she dead? Did she... She's not dead! Now she might be dead. Please dodge. What can I say? If you are an evil Advent sympathizer, then do feel free to click the dislike button. My name's been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Heart of the cards!